welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest, most profound dilemmas any of us can face, the choice between revenge and forgiveness. It's a conflict that really shapes our personal lives, our communities, and honestly, even the course of history. I mean, think about it. It's a question every single one of us is going to face, sometimes in small ways, and sometimes in really big, life-changing ways. An injustice happens, a line gets crossed, and suddenly we're left standing at a crossroads. So, how do we respond? The answer we choose can literally define the rest of our lives. This quote, it just takes this whole abstract idea and makes it painfully real. This isn't just some philosophical puzzle. This is a real father standing in the rubble of a bombing, holding his dying daughter's hand. And his response? Forgiveness? It's staggering, right? And it perfectly frames the two powerful forces we're going to explore today. Okay, so to help us navigate this really complex topic, here's a roadmap. First, we'll talk about that initial wound, the sting of injustice. Then we'll explore the two very different paths that branch out from there. After that, we'll weigh the arguments for each before, finally, we look beyond all of that to what might be the ultimate goal, recovery. So let's start at the beginning, that first moment, the sting of injustice. This isn't just a bad thing that happens. It's a fundamental challenge to our sense of how the world is supposed to work. And how we choose to respond, well, that becomes a defining part of who we are. And the scale of this experience is just huge. It can be something as personal and intimate like a friend betraying your trust, or it can be as massive as a conflict between nations that goes on for generations. But no matter how big or small, that core dilemma, it's always the same. All right, let's walk down the first path, the one that often feels like the most natural instinct, revenge. It's that primal, gut-level urge to strike back, to make the person who hurt you feel the exact same pain. It's a powerful and deeply, deeply human impulse. So, what exactly is revenge? Well, at its core, it's about giving harm back for harm received. And I absolutely love this phrase from the philosopher Francis Bacon, a kind of wild justice. Doesn't that just capture it perfectly? It's an attempt at getting justice, for sure, but it's a justice that operates outside the rules, outside of civility. It's justice, untamed. And this shows just how complex the psychology behind it all is. Revenge isn't just about pure anger. Social psychologists tell us it's often about power, taking back control when you've been made to feel powerless. It's about protecting your status, sending a message, don't mess with me. And a lot of the time, it comes from this deep-seated belief that the world should be fair. And if it's not, well, we feel this powerful drive to fix it ourselves. And this drive for revenge, it is nothing new. For a huge chunk of human history, revenge wasn't just some personal feeling. It was the system. In many societies, feuds were the main form of justice. I mean, think about the Albanian blood feuds, the Jokmaria, where one offense could kick off a cycle of violence that lasted for generations. Or in pre-modern Japan, where katakeuchi, these revenge killings, were actually seen as a duty to protect your family's honor. It just goes to show how deeply wired this idea of retaliation is in our history. We've all heard this famous saying, right? It perfectly captures that calculated side of revenge. It's not always a hot-headed, snap decision. It can be patient, planned, deliberate. But that very coldness, that calculation, it kind of leads you to wonder, is there another way, a path that moves away from that chilling logic of getting even? And that brings us to the other side of the crossroads, a path that is often so much harder to walk, forgiveness. And this isn't about being weak, it's about the incredible challenge of actually letting go. One of the biggest roadblocks to forgiveness is that we misunderstand what it even is. So let's be clear, forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. It's not excusing the behavior, and it doesn't even mean you have to reconcile with the person. No, it's an internal thing. It's about letting go of those corrosive negative feelings like hate and bitterness. And at its very best, it's an act of generosity, where you can genuinely wish that other person well. This quote from a survivor of the Rwandan genocide is just incredibly powerful. In situations like that, people might have to reconcile. They have to find a way to live next to their former enemies, just so society can function. But that's a practical thing. Forgiveness, as this survivor points out, is something totally different. It's a personal, moral choice that might happen or it might not. The parable of the prodigal son gives us this amazing picture of forgiveness. The son messes up, wastes everything, and comes home totally ashamed. But what does the father do? He celebrates. And his forgiveness isn't about making himself feel better, it's all about his son. He's celebrating because the one who was lost is now found. This shows us that forgiveness isn't really a self-help tool, it's a generous, outward-looking act of love. Okay, so we have two starkly different paths leading from the exact same injury. Now let's put them side by side and really weigh the moral arguments for and against each one. This is where things get really complicated. So let's look at the case for revenge. People who support it say it's not just about feeling good, it's about restoring a moral balance. It can be a way of showing loyalty to the person who was harmed, to show that their suffering mattered. And hey, it can be a pretty powerful deterrent. But the arguments against it are just as strong. Revenge, like Bakken said, bypasses the law and can lead to chaos. It often creates way more suffering than it solves, and it can trap people in these awful, endless cycles of violence.
Now, what about forgiveness? The arguments for it are pretty clear. It's a way to rise above our worst emotions, to accept that we're all human and we all make mistakes, and to be the person who finally says, enough. The hating has to stop. It can break that cycle. But the case against it is also really powerful. For some, forgiving a terrible act feels like you're betraying the victim. It can feel like you're minimizing how bad the crime was, pretending it doesn't matter. It can feel like a total disrespect to the suffering someone went through.
And this whole moral debate brings us, inevitably, to this question. It's a question that people have argued about for centuries, and it really pushes the limits of what we can imagine. Are there some things that are so awful, so heinous, that they just exist beyond the possibility of forgiveness? Thinking about this really shifts our focus from the act itself to the person who had to live through it. And this brings us to a really crucial shift in how we look at this. What if the main goal isn't about the person who wronged you at all? What if it's not about balancing some cosmic scorecard of justice, but about the victim's own journey back to being okay? Let's explore the psychology of healing. Psychologists make this super important distinction between relief and recovery. Revenge can and often does give you a powerful, short-term sense of relief. It can feel really good in the moment, but that's often just a temporary fix, kind of like a sugar rush that comes with a crash later. The real goal, the place we should be trying to get to, is long-term recovery, a genuine return to good mental health. So how do people get there? Well, research points to a pretty common path. The initial reaction can be really messy, sometimes even involving things like blaming yourself. The next vital step is reaching out for support from friends and family. But the really transformative stage, the one that leads to true healing, is step 3, finding a lesson, or what psychologists call meaning-making. So, meaning-making is basically the process of turning a terrible event into a source of personal growth. It doesn't mean you're happy it happened, not at all. It means that, over time, you find a way to fit that experience into your life story in a way that makes you wiser or stronger. It's about finding some kind of benefit in the aftermath of the pain. And this right here is maybe the single most important takeaway from all the psychological research. Even though the urge for revenge is totally understandable and that relief it offers is real, studies consistently show that holding on to those vengeful feelings actually works against your long-term healing. In other words, the path of revenge might lead you further away from recovery, not closer to it. Which leaves us with this one last essential question to think about. When we're faced with an injustice, what's our real goal? Is it something external, to settle a score and fix the world? Or is it something internal, to navigate our own pain and find a way back to being whole and healthy again? The answer we choose, that might just be the true price of justice. For more videos like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notification bell so you will be notified when we upload new videos in the future. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye.